Today is a feast day. It's a feast day for anyone who is short. You can laugh louder, that's a joke. At the last service at 8:30, we have a parishioner who is rather slight of stature, as the gospel says, and his wife turned to him and said, "That's you." But today we are looking at this person, Zacchaeus. Yes, he was short in stature, but that's the very reason probably why he stuck out. You know, he was the chief tax collector, it's said. Most of us don't like tax collectors. That's just the nature of it. But you see, in our society, in our time, we have really kind of agreed, we have a social compact where we decide that we will give part of what we have over to the authority of government so that we can do things as we understand it for the common good. That's the way it's supposed to work. And so tax collectors in our day and age are agents of the government. Well, they always were, but in this case, in our way of doing things, the government actually pays them. They get a salary or wage, just like anyone else is doing some work for our government. In Jesus' time, it wasn't that way. We've talked about this a little bit before, where in fact tax collectors themselves, they got their living by adding a surcharge to the tax that they were to collect. It's kind of like the mob. Think about it. There's the Godfather, the Don. There's the Emperor. They determine how much money needs to come in. And so they bring it in. But you see, the Godfather, the Emperor, can't do it himself, so he has to get others to do it. And so the way that the whole system works is that as you go down the ladder, everybody takes their cut. So what's happening here is that Zacchaeus recruits other people to collect the taxes. Those people add a little bit on to the amount that they're supposed to collect for themselves, and then they have to take a little bit of that and give it to who else? Zacchaeus. He's the capo. He's the one who is in charge of a lot of the thugs who are collecting from the businesses around. That's the way the mob works. That's us very much the same way. I'm not saying that the Roman Empire, well, maybe it was. I don't know, but that's just the way it worked. So Zacchaeus, if we hate tax collectors, and if those people hated tax collectors, not only because they took their money, but also because, in fact, they were recruited from among their own people. So they were seen to be collaborators with an occupying force. And part of the money that they collected went to pay for the soldiers who occupied the territory. So they're doubly hated. So you can imagine how badly hated Zacchaeus was. Because he wasn't just any old tax collector. He was the chief tax collector. And obviously, he took quite a big slice. Because as the gospel writer tells us, he was rich. Rich off taking people's taxes. Oh, what a scandal for us. But again, that's just the way it was done. So it's no wonder that this little guy, hi Steve, this little guy, our own Zacchaeus over there, went into the crowd wanting to see this Jesus that he had heard so much about, and he's trying to get over the top of all of these other people, and he can't do it. Do you think they're going to let him in? No, I don't think so. He's not exactly one of their favorite people, so he's not going to do that. And so he says, he's a pretty smart guy. I mean, after all, he is the chief tax collector. He goes and he sees the sycamore tree, and he scampers up the sycamore tree and sits himself out on one of the branches. You know, we have one of those trees in front of the rectory, so you can kind of get an idea of what a sycamore tree is like. I don't know if they grow that big in Palestine, but in fact, it's a pretty big tree as trees go. So he's pretty high up there. And so Jesus is coming along, and usually his retinue, his apostles and other disciples and other people who are listening to his teaching, they're following him along as he journeys to Jericho. And there we are. Suddenly, rather than talking to the people around him or people along the side of the road who came to see him, he looks up and he says, "Zacchaeus, come down here. I mean to come to your house today." Can you imagine? Well, we already know what the people felt. They were grumbling. They weren't very happy that Jesus is doing this. He's going to go eat with this, not only any old sinner, but this sinner of all people. The capo in the mob, as it were. Can you imagine what Zacchaeus felt? Zacchaeus, the one that everybody hated, the one that everybody rejected, the one that nobody would let through to see Jesus coming through. They would sooner push him aside. They would sooner see that he didn't exist at all. And it's this one that Jesus looks up and he looks him in the eye and he says, "Zacchaeus, come down. I mean to come to your house today." Zacchaeus, suddenly thinking, what's going on here? And he collects his wits and he starts to climb down the tree carefully and he runs, and probably they finally let him through because it's Jesus who's calling him. And so he stands in front of Jesus, and Jesus looks at him and he says, "Lord, half of what I have I give to the poor. And if I defrauded anybody, I give it back to them 4 times over." And Jesus says, "Salvation has come to your house this day, for you are a true son of Abraham." Jesus didn't say that to him because he gave up half of his wealth. He didn't say that to him because he gave up half of his wealth and promised to pay people back, make restitution 4 times over. More than simply paying people back. He was paying them to forgive him. Jesus didn't bring salvation because of that. He brought salvation because in that moment, Zacchaeus was changed. He went from a person who was busy in the world gathering wealth to himself, busy in the world gathering power to himself, and in that moment realized what it was that Jesus came to do. Jesus came to proclaim good news to the poor. And boy, was this good news. Zacchaeus became part of the mission of Jesus. And he didn't do so. Jesus didn't manipulate him into it. He willingly did it simply because Jesus saw him in the tree. In the tree probably because he was rejected by everybody else around. In the tree up high. And he says, "I'm coming to your house today." So it didn't matter to Jesus how bad Zacchaeus was or what the people thought about Zacchaeus. It didn't matter to Jesus how big of a sinner Zacchaeus was. He looked him in the eye and he said, "I'm coming to you today." And so, Zacchaeus is changed. Is he really changed that quickly? Or perhaps, just perhaps, he's been thinking about this for a while. Maybe he's heard about this Jesus and the teaching that Jesus has. And maybe, just maybe, he's been trying to figure out what's really wrong in my life. How can I make it right? How can I find some peace in life? How can I find some acceptance among my own people? And it was Jesus in that instant. It's been said of a stonecutter that the 100th blow of the hammer on the chisel is not what cut the stone, but rather the 99 that preceded it. That last 100th pound was just the last one, the last little bit that was needed. Maybe that's what's going on in Zacchaeus' life right now. that he's been questioning who he was. He was questioning what he did, and he just didn't know how to make it right. And it was Jesus who had that final little blow, and he invites him in to his own life and expects Zacchaeus to open the door to Jesus. And it happens. God is constantly at work in us, in our lives. God is constantly inviting. God is constantly proclaiming. God is constantly serving in Jesus. God is constantly telling us how much he loves us. He's telling the world that day after day after day now for 2,000 years. With the crucifixion and death of Jesus, that final self-giving of love. And maybe it just, we're so thick. Maybe we are hard-headed. Tostadore, the Italians say, that we need a chisel to be pounding at us, not once, not twice, but 99 times. And finally, it's that one last one. When Jesus reaches out, he looks at you and he says, open your doors. I'm coming to you today to dine in your house. But suddenly, as with St. Paul, the scales fall off and we're able to see. Or like Zacchaeus, we finally see the way forward. That's what God does. That's how God works. Sometimes we're just a little thick. Sometimes it takes a lot of repeated blows to cut through the stone. But it's that last one. When was the last time you saw the face of Jesus? When was the last time you saw Jesus say to you, open your doors, I'm coming to your heart today. I'm coming into your life today. Have you ever had that moment? Or is God still hammering away? It doesn't matter. The stone cutter cuts a stone with love. That's why he's a stone cutter. God chips away at our hardness of heart because of love. That's why he's God. And he's doing it day after day after day, not only to you, but to a broken world out there that seeks peace, that seeks care and love. And it becomes our mission, just like it became Zacchaeus' mission, to bring good news to the poor, to proclaim liberty to captives, to do all of the things that Jesus said about doing in his mission and ministry. He calls on you and me to do these things day after day after day. And even when it seems so frustrating that we're out there and nobody seems to want to listen, it doesn't matter. We just need to keep pounding. Because you never know when you are that final blow that breaks through a stone-cold heart. If Christ has come to you, if Christ has dined with you, if you have opened the doors to Christ, it is good. For like Zacchaeus was a true child of Abraham, opening the heart to Christ makes us children of God. But then, we need to do more. We need to do as Zacchaeus did. It's not about the money. No, I'm not talking about that, although I'd like to, but we're not going to. It's really about who's first. Who's first? Is it the desire for worldly possessions, for wealth, for power, for prestige, all of those things that our society says are signs of our success? Or are all of those things there, but it really is God who has the clear path to our heart? That's the only thing Jesus is looking for. That's the only thing that makes Zacchaeus different in today's lesson. That he was willing to come down off that tree and open his heart to Jesus. And when he did, he found the strength to do marvelous things. So too can we. Who is first in your life? Have you opened your doors to Christ? Has your heart been softened by that final blow? If it is, give thanks. And then take up the mission that Jesus entrusts to you.